Welcome back to the Deep Dive, the show where we take complex research and distill it into those aha moments you crave. Today, we're tackling a vision that feels almost like the holy grail of artificial intelligence. An AI agent that could instantly adapt to any new challenge, any new environment, without a single practice run right out of the
Yeah,
box.
it's huge ambition.
We've all seen the dazzling breakthroughs in reinforcement, learning from mastering intricate board games like GOAT to optimizing nuclear fusion. But taking those same agents and deploying them directly into the messy, unpredictable, and often dangerous real world, that's where the dream has historically hit a formidable snag.
You've perfectly captured the essence of the challenge. That leap from simulation to reality, the notorious sim-to-real gap, is arguably the most significant barrier preventing RL from truly becoming the versatile, ubiquitous problem solver we've long envisioned.
It's a big one.
It's not just a technical hurdle, it's a profound conceptual one that shapes how we think about AI's interaction with the physical world.
And that's precisely why we're so excited for today's deep dive. We're stepping inside a truly monumental piece of research, a dissertation titled Zero-Shot Reinforcement Learning for Real-World Problems. This extensive work doesn't just meticulously dissect the formidable barriers holding RL back, it more importantly proposes some incredibly ingenious, often counterintuitive solutions.
Right. Our mission for this deep dive is to truly immerse ourselves in the thought process of the brilliant mind behind this work. Imagine we have the author, a leading expert in deep reinforcement learning, sitting right here with us.
Okay.
We'll be guiding you, our listener, a fellow fourth-year PhD student in deep reinforcement learning, hungry for the nitty-gritty through their findings, their methodologies, and the profound implications for the future of RL.
Exactly. We're going to navigate the intricate technical details, exploring the why and the how behind their groundbreaking approach, to understand how they propose to build agents that solve complex, unseen tasks with zero prior experience in deployment.
We're going to explore their intellectual journey, their empirical findings, and what it all means for where the field of RL is headed.
So let's begin. We often celebrate RL's incredible successes in controlled environments. But if we're candid, it's not yet the omnipresent problem solver many hoped for. What, in your view, are the fundamental reasons RL isn't everywhere yet? What are the grand challenges preventing it from truly taking over?
Well, we peel back the layers. The most fundamental issue boils down to what we call sample inefficiency.
Ah, yes.
Reinforcement learning agents are notoriously data hungry. To truly master a complex problem, we're often talking about the need for billions of environment interactions.
Billions, really?
Billions, yeah. To put that into perspective, for a human, that's equivalent to many lifetimes of focused learning.
Wow, billions of interactions. That immediately sends up red flags for almost any real-world application. I mean, consider trying to achieve that level of trial and error in domains like healthcare, where every failed experiment could risk patient health.
Absolutely, or industrial control.
Or in industrial control, where missteps could damage multi-million-dollar infrastructure, or even autonomous driving, where it could endanger road users. Unconstrained trial and error learning in these settings isn't just costly, it's often outright dangerous, economically unfeasible, and ethically questionable.
Precisely. And this leads us directly to a crucial bottleneck.
The simulator gap.
A simulator gap. Historically, almost every widely celebrated RL application, whether it's mastering classic arcade games, winning against the world's best Go players, or even controlling plasma in nuclear fusion reactors, has relied heavily on what we call perfect simulators.
Right.
These are environments where we can meticulously leverage known truths about environment physics, allowing us to easily generate vast, effectively infinite amounts of synthetic data. The rules are perfectly defined, the physics are absolute.
But the real world rarely adheres to such perfect rule sets, does it? Why is that perfection so elusive for most real-world problems?
Well, the author makes a very compelling case that for the vast majority of real-world scenarios, we simply cannot neatly summarize their physics or dynamics with generic, easily programmable equations.
It's just too complex.
It is. Think about it. Building these perfect simulators is often prohibitively expensive. It can take highly skilled engineers months or even years to configure them to faithfully replicate reality with enough fidelity to be useful.
Right, I can imagine.
Consider the difference between the completely deterministic, rule-bound environment of chess, where every piece's movement is known, versus the stochastic high-dimensional physics of mastering a golf swing, where wind, terrain, spin, and subtle muscular movements all interact.
Totally different worlds.
Or, more practically, building a simulator for a central heating system in a unique, irregularly shaped building, complete with variable occupancy and external weather patterns, versus simulating a standard video game. The underlying physics and their ease of faithful simulation are fundamentally qualitatively different.
So, the famous reward is enough hypothesis. The idea that true intelligence and its associated abilities can ultimately be understood as subserving reward maximization that's undeniably driven incredible progress. But the reality is, despite those successes, RL agents aren't yet these omnipresent general-purpose problem solvers we once envisioned. There's a persistent, tangible gap.
Indeed. The chasm between these highly controlled, simulated training environments and the messy, unpredictable conditions of real-world deployment remains significant.
It's huge.
This profound disconnect is the core problem that this dissertation courageously confronts, meticulously laying the groundwork for a viable path forward: the rise of zero-shot reinforcement learning.
Zero shot. That's the absolute linchpin here, isn't it? The ambition to develop agents that can adapt to entirely new scenarios with zero practice shots, meaning absolutely no additional learning or planning during deployment itself.
Precisely. This capability is not just desirable, it's crucial. It's the key to bridging that notorious sim-to-real problem, where an agent trained in simulation needs to operate in reality.
Makes sense.
Furthermore, it addresses situations where real-world dynamics might shift from what was observed even in historical data sets, or where tasks simply change on the fly. It's about deploying an agent and having it perform effectively immediately, without any costly or dangerous adaptation period.
That makes perfect sense. Now, for RL techniques to be truly deployable in the real world, the author posits that they must successfully contend with at least one of three critical, often intertwined, constraints. Could you walk us through those, perhaps as if the author were explaining their core motivation directly to us?
Absolutely. Let's step into their shoes. The author's journey began by deeply contemplating these real-world limitations. The first he identifies is the data quality constraint.
Okay. Data quality.
He observes that real-world datasets, when they even exist, are almost always small, incredibly homogeneous, and usually collected by existing incumbent controllers that were optimizing for a specific task performance, not for data diversity or expressiveness.
So basically biased data.
Exactly. Biased and narrow. This is a fundamental challenge to training any generalizable policy. If your data doesn't span the full range of possibilities, your agent will inevitably struggle when faced with something truly novel.
That immediately resonates with anyone who's ever tried to collect data for a complex system. You get what you get, and it's rarely enough or varied enough. So an agent trained on that narrow, specific data wouldn't have a clue what to do when confronted with even slightly different conditions.
Exactly. The second constraint is the observability constraint.
Right. Not seeing everything.
In the real world, the assumption of having a perfectly observed Markov state is often violated. Agents experience the world through finite, noisy sensors. Environmental physics can subtly change, and crucially, rewards might be delayed, sparse, or even incomplete.
Like an autonomous car.
Think of an autonomous vehicle relying on LiDAR and cameras. It receives partial noisy sensor readings, but can it truly perceive the full state of the world, including intentions of other drivers or unseen road conditions? Not fully.
So we're never dealing with that pristine, perfect state information we take for granted in most simulated environments. It's always an approximation. And the third, and perhaps most daunting, constraint.
That is the data availability constraint. This is where many compelling real-world problems simply lack any prior data or pre-existing simulators.
No data, no simulator. Ouch.
Yeah. As we discussed, building perfect simulators is prohibitively expensive, taking months or years, and historical data logs may simply not exist for novel systems or processes. How do you even begin to train an RL agent when there's literally nothing to pre-train on?
A blank slate.
These three constraints, in the author's view, form the bedrock of the challenges that zero-shot RL absolutely must overcome to be truly impactful.
That's a crystal clear map of the challenges. And to truly appreciate the author's innovative solutions, it's worth a quick, targeted refresher on some core RL concepts, particularly for you, our PhD listener. Let's start with the fundamental canvases we paint on: Markov decision processes and partially observable MDPs or MDPs and POMDPs.
Absolutely. Good idea. At the foundation of nearly all sequential decision-making in RL, we have Markov decision processes, or MDPs. This is our standard mathematical framework.
The basics.
Right. We have an agent interacting with an environment characterized by its state S, the actions the agent can take, the immediate reward it receives, and a transition function P that defines the probabilistic outcome of taking an action in a given state. The agent's overarching goal is deceptively simple: maximize the cumulative rewards it receives over time.
But as you just highlighted, the real world is rarely that clean and perfectly transparent. That's where partially observable MDPs or POMDPs enter the picture, reflecting that real-world messiness.
Precisely. POMBPs extend MDPs to handle those situations where the agent cannot access the full underlying state of the environment. Instead, it receives observations OTT, which only provide partial noisy information.
Like sensor readings.
Exactly. In such cases, a policy can't just react to the current observation. It often needs to condition its actions on a history or trajectory of past observation-action pairs, let's call it LLT, to infer or estimate the true underlying state. This need to reason about hidden states from limited observations is a key technical challenge that the dissertation tackles head-on.
To make effective decisions in these complex scenarios, agents need a way to quantify the long-term utility of different actions and policies. That's where value functions and the Bellman equation become absolutely critical.
Indeed, value functions like V, which estimates the value of being in a particular state, or Q, say, which estimates the value of taking a specific action in a state, are fundamental. They quantify the expected future returns of following a particular policy from that point onwards.
How good is this state or this action?
Basically, yes. The Bellman optimality equation is the bedrock recursive relationship here. It elegantly states that the optimal value of a state-action pair can be broken down into the immediate reward received plus the discounted expected optimal value of the next state, taking into account all possible subsequent states and actions. This recursive equation is the computational heart of how agents learn to plan for and optimize long-term future rewards.
Got it. With those foundational concepts firmly in mind, let's quickly review the key paradigms in reinforcement learning that pave the way for this dissertation's work, as broadly outlined in Figure 2.1 in the text. We have model-free RL, one-step model-based RL, and then the more advanced multi-step model-based RL.
Okay. Starting with model-free RL, these methods are like empirical learners. They build policies or value functions directly from raw experience, learning by doing, without explicitly trying to construct an internal model of how the environment's dynamics work.
So no internal physics engine.
Right. They don't try to predict the next state given an action. They just learn which actions lead to good outcomes through trial and error.
And within model-free, we often talk about a few core approaches.
Correct. We have policy gradient methods, which directly learn and approximate the optimal policy. They're excellent for continuous action spaces, which are very common in domains like robotics, but they can be notoriously data inefficient.
Need lots of data.
Yeah. Then there are value-based methods like Q-learning, which maintain estimates of the optimal action value function, Qs, updating them using a powerful technique called temporal difference, or TD learning.
TD learning.
Crucial, very. TD learning essentially learns by comparing its current estimate of a value to a bootstrapped estimate from the very next step, reducing the difference over time. These methods can be more data efficient, especially when you can leverage off-policy data collected by a policy different from the one you're currently trying to learn.
And then bridging these two worlds, we have actor-critic methods.
Exactly. Methods like TD3, or twin-delayed deep deterministic policy gradient, and SAC, or soft actor-critic, cleverly combine the strengths of both. They have an actor that learns the policy which action to take, and a critic that learns the value function, providing feedback to the actor on how good its actions were.
Best of both worlds, kind of.
Kinda, yeah. The dissertation highlights TD3, which made significant strides by addressing two common issues: Q-value overestimation, using a clever technique called clipped double Q learning, and poor exploration, by adding targeted Gaussian noise to actions during the critic updates.
Right, those are key improvements.
Absolutely. For those interested in the precise mechanics, equations 2.12 and 2.13 in the dissertation are central to understanding TD3's core loss functions, detailing how the critic accurately estimates values and how the actor learns to maximize those values without falling into common traps.
Okay, so that's model-free. Moving on, what about one-step model-based RL? This approach isn't like it does try to build an internal model of the environment.
That's spot on. One-step model-based RL explicitly tries to learn the system dynamics, essentially building a predictive model that forecasts the next state has +1, given the current status in action at.
Building that little physics engine.
Exactly. This learned model is then tremendously powerful because it can be used to generate synthetic experience for planning without needing to interact with the real environment. This dramatically reduces the amount of real-world interaction needed. Think of methods like PEATS or probabilistic ensembles with trajectory sampling.
Right. Data efficiency boost.
Big time. While classical methods like Gaussian processes, seen in Pilco, offer excellent data efficiency for simpler systems, they often struggle with scalability to high-dimensional, complex environments. Deep neural networks, on the other hand, scale far better for these complex, high-dimensional systems.
And this brings us to what the author considers truly fascinating for zero-shot generalization. Multi-step model-based RL, which they refer to as far-sighted dynamics models. This is where the long game comes into play.
Indeed, this is where the ability to generalize truly blossoms. These methods aim to capture long-run dynamics, predicting not just the immediate next state, but future states over many time steps.
Thinking further ahead.
Much further. This class includes powerful concepts like successor representations, SRs, and successor features, SFs. SRs model the expected discounted sum of future state occurrences. SFs generalize this further by using feature maps, denoted phi, to embed states into a lower dimensional space where rewards are assumed to be linear.
Okay, that linearity is key.
It's elegant. The elegant aspect here is that if your reward function changes, you don't need to relearn the entire policy. You only need to update those linear reward weights, which is a much simpler, faster operation.
Makes adaptation much easier. And the most general and arguably powerful of these multi-step methods.
That would be universal successor features, USFs, and forward-backward FB representations. These are truly foundational for zero-shot capabilities. They go a step further by disentangling the policy from the successor features, or representations, by conditioning predictions on a parameterized policy. Let's call it PACE.
Disentangling policy and dynamics.
Exactly. The key insight, building on work by Twadi et al. In 2022, is that these USFFB representations can be trained on purely reward-free offline data sets. And then, here's the magic, they can zero-shot generalize to entirely unseen goal-reaching or dense reward tasks simply by inferring a task vector z-test from a few reward-labeled states using a simple linear regression.
Wow, just infer the task vector.
Yeah, because of their broad applicability and ability to represent diverse tasks, these are sometimes aptly called foundation policies.
That's truly fascinating. So they learn this generalized understanding of how future states unfold independently of a specific reward, and then you just effectively plug in a new reward function by inferring that task vector. But as you pointed out earlier, training these methods often requires a lot of data, and often we only have offline data sets. So let's pivot to offline reinforcement learning, ORL, and its inherent challenges.
Right. Offline RL is critically important because it addresses the real-world constraint of learning from fixed, static data sets, meaning the agent cannot interact with the environment to collect new data.
Stuck with the data you have.
Exactly. The enormous challenge here is the distribution shift problem. When an agent is trained on a fixed data set, typically collected by some behavior policy, the learned policy might try to explore actions or states that were not present in that initial data set.
Going off a no-piece.
Right. This leads to a dangerous distribution shift and, crucially, highly unreliable Q-value estimates for those out-of-distribution or ODLON actions.
And that's a recipe for disaster, isn't it? The agent might optimistically believe an action it's never seen before is wonderful, when in reality it could be catastrophic. So the dissertation outlines several ingenious strategies to constrain this adventurous behavior, as visualized in figures 2.2 and 2.3.
Exactly. These strategies broadly fall into three categories. First, we have policy constraints. Methods like TD3BC, which adds a behavior cloning term to TD3's loss, essentially telling the agent, stay close to the data you've seen.
Mimic the good stuff.
Pretty much. Or the decision transformer, DT. The decision transformer is particularly interesting as it reframes RL as a sequence learning problem, predicting actions based on a desired return to go, get, leveraging powerful transformer architectures to imitate high-value trajectories observed in the data. Equation 2.26 highlights DT's trajectory structure if you want to dig in.
Then we shift from constraining the policy to constraining the values, value function constraints.
Precisely. These methods, such as conservative Q-learning, CQL, and implicit Q-learning, IQL, aim to learn pessimistic estimates of Q values for those problematic OD state action pairs.
Don't be too optimistic about the unknown.
That's the idea. Instead of optimistically guessing, they deliberately underestimate. CQL, for instance, adds a special term to the Q loss to minimize peaks in current Q directs for owed actions while maximizing Q for the state actions that are well represented in the dataset.
Pull down the unknowns, push up the knowns.
Exactly. IQL, on the other hand, uses asymmetric least squares, or expectile regression, to carefully tune this pessimism. For those delving into the mechanics, equations 2.27, 2.28, and 2.29 provide the core loss functions for CQL and IQL, illustrating how they achieve this crucial manipulation of value estimates.
And finally, a third approach, model constraints.
These are methods like model-based offline reinforcement learning, or MOREL. MOREL takes a different route. It explicitly identifies unknown state actions, often by using ensemble uncertainty to spot where its model is less confident.
Find where the model is guessing.
Right. And then it deliberately forces transitions from these uncertain unknown states to a negative age-alone state. This essentially makes the model profoundly pessimistic about where owed actions might lead, acting as a powerful safeguard. Equations 2.3 and 2.31 define Morel's pessimistic dynamics and reward functions. These techniques are absolutely vital for making offline learning robust and safe for real-world application.
Okay, that brings us to the crucial definition at the heart of this dissertation, zero-shot generalization in RL, the nuance. This is a much stricter definition than what we typically consider transfer learning or meta-RL, isn't it?
It is, and the distinction is critical.
Yeah.
The dissertation defines zero-shot as the ability to adapt to changes in the reward function, R, or the transition function, P, at test time within the very first deployment episode without any practice or additional learning.
First shot, no practice.
Exactly. This is a far more stringent criterion than transfer learning or meta-RL, which typically allow for multiple adaptation episodes, even if short, in the new environment. Zero-shot means immediate, effective performance.
So, no learning during deployment, just immediate effective action. And the zero-shot capability applies to both task generalization and dynamics generalization.
Precisely. Task generalization involves training an agent on a diverse set of tasks, hoping that one might be similar enough to an unseen test task. Techniques like hindsight experience replay, HER, or various skill discovery methods fall into this category.
Learning lots of skills.
Right. As we discussed, USFs and FBE offer a powerful unified approach by disentangling rewards from state dynamics. Dynamics generalization, on the other hand, is about making policies robust to changes in the environment itself, for instance, adapting to different friction coefficients, varying payloads, or environmental disturbances.
Coping with the changing world.
Yes. This might be achieved through methods like domain randomization, unsupervised environment design, or by quickly inferring context using approaches like UPOSI.
With those critical building blocks and definitions in mind, let's dive into the author's first major contribution, addressing the data quality constraint, tackling imperfect datasets. You highlighted earlier that existing methods fail on low-quality data. What was the critical failure mode they observed that prompted this line of investigation?
What's truly fascinating and quite counterintuitive is the observation that existing state-of-the-art zero-shot RL methods, particularly vanilla forward-backward, or FB representations, suffer a critical and systematic failure when trained on low-quality, small, or low-diversity datasets. They become dangerously overconfident.
Overconfident? How so?
Well, this failure manifests as a paradox, which the dissertation vividly illustrates in Figure 3.2.
The paradox, okay.
Yes, the paradox is striking. The log Q values predicted during training actually increase as the size and quality of the dataset decrease.
Wait, they go up with less data. That's backward.
Completely backward. This is a direct, alarming contradiction to the extremely low returns observed from the actual policies themselves. It's a clear signal of severe overestimation of those out-of-distribution or owed state action pairs.
So the agent thinks it's doing great, but it's actually terrible.
Exactly. The agent, in essence, is living in a state of optimistic delusion. It believes it knows what to do in unvisited states, and it's wildly, dangerously optimistic about the outcomes.
That didactic example in Figure 3.3, showing a point mass maze where all left actions are deliberately removed from the dataset, really hammers this home.
It's a perfect, almost painful illustration. Imagine a vanilla FB agent. Even without a single left action in its training data, it will still optimistically estimate high values for these completely unseen actions.
Even though it has no evidence for it.
None. This leads it to venture into unknown territory, to confidently pursue paths it's never experienced and ultimately fail to complete tasks, even if the necessary information to solve them does exist within the constrained dataset by finding an alternative route. It's like having a map with a missing road, but your AI-powered GPS still confidently tells you to take that non-existent road, leading you astray.
So if the problem is this optimistic delusion about unobserved actions, the proposed solutions must involve leveraging the wisdom from offline RL to mitigate this ODO overestimation. The goal is to bias models to conservatively value state actions not well represented in the dataset.
Exactly. The author's insight was to repurpose and adapt regularization techniques from the offline RL literature. The dissertation introduces two key novel methods to achieve this conservatism in the multitask zero-shot setting: value conservative forward-backward, VCFB, and measure conservative forward-backward, MCFB.
Okay, VCFB and MCFB. Let's start with VCFB. How does it tackle this overestimation problem?
All right. VCFB applies a conservative Q-learning CQL-like regularization directly to the Q function, which in the FB framework is derived from FSAZTZ.
So regularizing the value estimate itself.
Precisely. It introduces a penalty term that actively works to minimize peaks in the current Q rate for those OD actions, while simultaneously ensuring that Q values for the in-data set state actions are maximized. What's crucial here is its scope. Unlike single-task QQL, VCFB suppresses OD action values for all task vectors drawn from the task sampling distribution Z, meaning it learns general conservatism.
Conservative across all potential tasks.
Yes. For the precise mathematical formulation, equation 3.01 lays out the loss function structure, showcasing how this penalty is integrated.
And MCFB takes a slightly different, perhaps more indirect approach to conservatism.
Indeed. Instead of directly regularizing the Q value, MCFB applies conservatism to the successor measure approximation itself, which is FSAZTBS+.
The expected future state visitations.
Exactly. The intuition is powerful. If we simply don't have enough data to know where an OD action leads, we pessimistically assume it has a low probability of leading to any desirable future states for any task. It's about being cautious about what future states you expect to visit. Equation 3.1 outlines this distinct loss function structure.
What about the implementation nuances? A fixed penalty scaling factor. Halsa sounds like it could be a real pain point to tune.
Oh, it absolutely was. A fixed Haas proved to be extremely fragile and sensitive to hyperparameters. So a crucial innovation was implementing a Lagrangian dual gradient descent approach to dynamically tune A based on a conservative budget.
Ah, adaptive tuning.
Smart. Very. This elegant mechanism ensures the penalty scales proportionally to the degree of overestimation currently present, adapting intelligently as the model learns. This is detailed comprehensively in equation C.6 in the appendix. Furthermore, for continuous action spaces, the challenging log sum extruve term in the CQL loss is approximated via importance sampling, using a smart mix of uniformly sampled actions, actions from the current policy, and actions from the policy conditioned on next states.
Okay.
Equation C.5 outlines this approximation. The authors typically found N-3 action samples to be a computationally efficient sweet spot for this.
So with these theoretically grounded solutions, how did they perform empirically? The XRL benchmark seems to be a key proving ground.
On the XRL benchmark, which features diverse domains like Walker, quadruped, cheetah, and point mass maze, both MCFB and VCFB delivered very strong results. They significantly outperformed vanilla FB and other baselines like SFLAP, GCIQL, and even single-task CQL, particularly on small and/or low-quality exploratory datasets.
Significantly outperformed. How much?
To put it quantitatively, VCFB achieved an impressive 150% and MCFB 137% of vanilla FB's IQM performance. That's not just a marginal gain, that's effectively boosting performance by half again the original, which is a massive leap in those crucial low data regimes.
That's huge. And there was a surprising crossover result too, wasn't there?
Yes, this was a truly novel and significant finding. These multicast conservative FB variants actually outperformed the single-task CQL baseline and expectation. VCFB reached 120% and MCFB 111% of CQL's IQM performance, considering the interquartile mean.
Wait, better than single-task CQL, even without reward labels?
Exactly. This is remarkable because CQL has access to task-specific reward labels, whereas these FE methods don't, and they need to fit policies for all tasks concurrently. It strongly suggests that a multitask approach to conservatism can generalize even better than task-specific pessimism in certain critical scenarios.
Oh, wow. Figure 3.6 really drives home the impact of dataset size on these methods.
It clearly illustrates a critical trend. The performance delta between these conservative variants and vanilla FB increases dramatically as the dataset size decreases.
The worse the data, the better they do relatively.
Precisely. This robustly confirms the author's hypothesis that conservatism is most acutely needed and most impactful in those low-data regimes, precisely addressing the data quality constraint faced in real-world problems. Furthermore, Table 3.1 provides reassuring evidence that these conservative variants maintain their performance on large, high-quality datasets, implying very little, if any, downside to adopting them.
So it helps when needed, doesn't hurt otherwise. Good trade-off. And what about the notoriously challenging D4RL benchmark, which represents even narrower distribution datasets?
On D4RL, a benchmark known for its difficult, expert-only datasets, Vanilla FB completely failed to solve any of the tasks, just totally bombed.
Ouch.
Yeah. In stark contrast, VCFB and MCFB drastically improved performance, achieving 5.6x and 6.8x higher scores, respectively, compared to Vanilla FB.
Huge improvement from failure.
Massive. While they still didn't quite match the top performance of task-specific CQL on these extremely narrow distributions, their significant improvement over Vanilla FB on such challenging datasets is undeniable evidence of their robustness.
So why did VCFB consistently tend to outperform MCFB in these experiments? Was there a specific reason discussed in the dissertation?
The dissertation offers a clear explanation for this. VCFB, by directly regularizing the Q function via FSAZZTDA, operates on a more generalized representation of task utility.
It regularizes the overall value.
Right. MCFB, which regularizes the successor measure via FSTBS+, has its updates tied more closely to the dataset's observed state transitions, BS+.
Tied more to the specific transition scene.
Exactly. As the dataset size shrinks and its diversity decreases, this closer tie to specific observed transitions can lead to poorer task coverage. VCFB's reliance on the more abstract and general task vector Z gives it an advantage in these extremely low-data, low-quality regimes, allowing for broader generalization.
Okay, that makes sense. That was a truly deep dive into navigating the data quality constraint. Now, let's move to the author's second major challenge, the observability constraint. Navigating imperfect information. You mentioned earlier that the assumption of fully observed Markov states is frequently violated in real-world scenarios. How does this impact zero-shot RL?
Absolutely. The real world is inherently noisy, partially occluded, and often subject to changing physics that an agent cannot fully perceive. This partial observability profoundly impacts standard zero-shot RL methods, which often implicitly assume perfect state information.
Because they expect perfect data.
Right. The dissertation meticulously exposes two key distinct ways standard memory-free FB methods fail under these conditions, vividly illustrated in Figure 4.2.
And those were state misidentification and task misidentification. Could you walk us through those failure modes?
Precisely. First, state misidentification occurs when partial, noisy observations are fed into the forward model F and the policy. The agent misidentifies its current state because its understanding of where it is becomes corrupted by this noise. It thinks it's in one state, but it's actually in another.
Lost its bearings.
Basically. Second, task misidentification happens when those same partial observations are passed to the backward model, B. Here, the agent misidentifies the task it's supposed to solve, as its inference of the reward function, derived from Z from B, becomes inaccurate.
It doesn't even know what goal it's chasing.
Exactly. What's particularly concerning is that when all components F, B, and B simultaneously receive partial observations, the performance of vanilla FB methods collapses dramatically. This indicates a dangerous compounding of these misidentification errors.
So if the problem is this widespread misidentification due to partial observations, the intuitive solution would be to give the agent some form of memory to integrate information over time. The proposed solution then is memory-based zero-shot RL, or FBM.
That's the core idea. The author recognized that to address this, we need to augment zero-shot RL methods with memory models. These models process trajectories of past observations and actions to infer the underlying Markov state or the broader task context.
Using history to figure out the present.
Exactly. At its heart, a memory model is a function f that outputs a new hidden state ht by effectively summarizing the current trajectory and its past internal state, as shown in equation 4.4. This ht then becomes a more robust, informed representation.
And the FBM architecture isn't just bolting on a single memory unit, but integrating memory throughout the core components.
Exactly. In the FBM architecture, the forward model F, the backward model B, and the policy now all condition their outputs on the hidden states of separate dedicated memory models, FF, FB, and F, respectively.
Separate memory for each part. Interesting.
Yes, this design choice is critical. It allows each component to form its own robust internal representation of the environment, tailored to its specific function. Equation 4.5 details precisely how F, B, and I take these memory-based hidden states as input. Crucially, even the test time task inference process for z-test is adapted to use reward-labeled trajectories rather than just individual states integrating the memory model's output as captured in equation 4.6.
So how did FBM perform empirically against these simulated partial observability challenges?
To test this, the authors ingeniously amended the XRL benchmark to simulate partial observability. They added Gaussian noise to states to create noisy environments, or randomly dropped state dimensions to create flickering environments, mimicking sensor imperfections.
Making the world fuzzy and incomplete.
Pretty much. In these challenging settings, FBM achieved significant improvements in performance over memory-free FB. Table D.5 in the appendix vividly illustrates this, showing FBM outperforming FB across multiple tasks like Kita, Quadruped, and Walker under both noisy and flickering conditions.
So memory definitely helped. And what about its ability to handle more fundamental shifts, like changes in the environment's dynamics? That's a harder problem than just sensor noise.
This is where FBM truly shines. The dissertation extensively investigates how FBM handles changes in environment dynamics, specifically both interpolation, where the new dynamics are within the range the agent was trained on.
Changes it's sort of seen before.
Right. And extrapolation, where the dynamics shift beyond anything the agent has ever seen.
Completely new physics.
Yeah. Figure 4.4 clearly demonstrates that FBM performs exceptionally well. It often matches or even exceeds the Oracle policy, an agent with perfect knowledge of the MDP, in dynamics interpolation scenarios, and shows surprisingly robust performance even in extrapolation settings. This highlights a key strength, its ability to quickly infer and adapt to unseen environmental shifts, even subtle ones.
Now, this next finding completely upends what many of us might expect. The discussion around the choice of the right memory model. Given the current dominance of transformers and structured state space models, S4D, in sequence modeling, what did the author discover here?
This was one of the most surprising and impactful findings, clearly presented in Figure 4.5. The dissertation comparatively analyzed GRUs, gated recurrent units, transformers, and S4D as memory components within the FBM framework.
Okay, the usual suspects.
Right. And, against the current tide of architectural preferences, GRUs emerged as the undisputed champion, consistently proving to be the most performant memory model for zero-shot partially observed RL.
Wait, GRUs, not transformers or S4?
GRUs. This isn't just an interesting footnote. It forces us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about which memory architectures are truly optimal in this specific, constrained context. Furthermore, training collapsed entirely when both the forward F and backward B models use non-GRU memory models, suggesting a critical sensitivity to the complex interaction between these memory components within the FBM framework.
Wow, so the Simply model worked better and was more stable here. That's a truly significant finding, pushing us to look beyond the latest trends. Are there any acknowledged limitations to FBM that the author points out?
Yes, the author is transparent about limitations. One key point is that current FBM experiments have focused predominantly on high-coverage, exploratory datasets, which isn't always available in the real world.
Back to the data quality issue.
Exactly. It remains an open and crucial question how FBM would interact with smaller, more homogeneous, real-world datasets, where the data quality constraint is also active. However, the author clearly identifies integrating Chapter 3's conservative methods into FBM as a clear and promising next step, likely to address this very concern.
Combining conservatism and memory. Makes sense. Okay, we've tackled data quality and observability. Now let's move to the ultimate frontier, the author's third and perhaps most daunting constraint, the data availability constraint. Learning from scratch in the real world. This is where there's no prior data and no pre-existing simulator. How do you even begin to train an RL agent under such extreme limitations?
This truly is the real-world dilemma. Many compelling real-world problems suffer from this exact issue. They lack both pre-existing simulators for training and any historical data sets to learn from.
The ultimate cold start problem.
It is. The dissertation uses a mission-efficient building control as its primary case study, which is incredibly relevant given that HVAC systems alone account for a staggering 31% of global energy use. Developing efficient control strategies here is a critical tool for climate change mitigation.
Huge potential impact. So what are the limitations of current approaches in a domain like building control when faced with this lack of data?
Current approaches typically rely on basic rule-based controllers, RBCs, which are simple to implement but notoriously energy inefficient and completely incapable of performing sophisticated demand response strategies, essentially manipulating power consumption to match grid supply and carbon intensity.
Simple rules, but dumb.
Pretty much. More advanced control methods like model predictive control, MPC, require expensive, highly accurate dynamical models of the building, which can take human experts months to build, often using specialized software like Energy Plus.
Takes ages to build the model.
Exactly. Most successful RL applications in building control have, again, relied heavily on pre-training in these physics-based simulators. Deploying agents without such pre-training has shown very limited success. For example, Lazek et al. 2020 achieved only a modest 9% cooling cost improvement with linear models after a 3-hour commissioning period. The challenge of learning from scratch is profound.
Just 9% after 3 hours. Not great. So the author needed an entirely new solution for this tabula rasa scenario, and they proposed Pearl, probabilistic emission-abating reinforcement learning. What was Pearl's core objective, and what was the headline result?
Pearl's core objective was ambitious: to enable deep RL algorithms to discover high-performing building control policies zero-shot, without any prior pre-training, and with only a very short commissioning period in the actual building.
Zero-shot, minimal commissioning.
Okay. And the headline result is truly impressive and potentially game-changing. Pearl was able to reduce emissions from buildings by up to 30% while rigorously maintaining occupant thermal comfort, all achieved with only 180 minutes. That's just 3 hours of pre-deployment data collection.
Whoa, hold on. 30% reduction in emissions while maintaining comfort with just 3 hours of data collection? That's not just a claim. That's potentially monumental for climate efforts. How did Pearl manage such an impressive feat so quickly? Let's break down its key components as visualized in Figure 5.1.
Absolutely. Pearl's success hinges on 3 critical components. First, the dynamics model. This isn't just any model. It's an ensemble of probabilistic deep neural networks.
Ensemble and probabilistic. Key words.
Yes. Instead of simply outputting a point prediction for the next state, each DNN outputs a multivariate Gaussian distribution, a mean EV, and a diagonal covariance over the next state given the current state and action. This ensemble approach is crucial because it provides an estimate of both epistemic uncertainty, what the model doesn't know due to lack of data, and aleatoric uncertainty, inherent randomness in the system. It's trained using maximum likelihood estimation, as defined in equation 5.1.
So it's not just predicting what will happen, but also how confident it is in that prediction, and critically where it's uncertain.
Exactly. That uncertainty quantification is key. The second component is planning, which uses model predictive path integral, MPPI, and trajectory sampling.
MPPI, okay.
The agent doesn't just pick an action. It actively plans by sampling multiple potential action sequences. It then unrolls these sequences as planning particles through the ensemble of dynamics models over a defined horizon H, predicting the return go for each simulated trajectory. The action sequence that yields the highest expected reward, go, is then selected for execution. Equations 5.2 and 5.3 beautifully illustrate these return calculations and how the action distribution is updated.
Planning with uncertainty. And the third component, system identification, is where Pearl really shines, particularly during that brief 3-hour commissioning phase. This sounds like an active learning strategy.
This is indeed where Pearl's ingenuity for real-world deployment truly stands out. During that short initial 3-hour commissioning period, the agent doesn't just passively collect data. Instead, it actively explores the state action space with the deliberate goal of maximizing information gain.
Seeking out useful information.
Exactly. Inspired by Bayesian optimization, it employs a strategy called maximum variance MV exploration. This means it strategically takes actions that lead to parts of the state space where its model ensemble has the highest predictive variance. It directly targets areas of uncertainty to efficiently improve the accuracy and coverage of its dynamics model. Equation 5.4 rigorously defines this variance. The dynamics model is updated continuously during this crucial initial exploration period, constantly refining its understanding of the building's physics.
Smart exploration. Let's look at the empirical validation in building control. The dissertation used diverse virtual buildings from the Energen platform, right?
Precisely. Experiments were conducted in a suite of diverse virtual buildings, a mixed-use building, an office block, and a seminar center, simulated in different geographies like Athens and Billund, varying considerably in size, number of thermal zones, and controllable parameters. This ensured the robustness of the findings.
Good variety. And the baselines.
The baselines were comprehensive, including traditional rule-based controllers, RBC, model-free PPO and SC, a deterministic model-based NPC DNN, and critically, an Oracle SAC agent pre-trained for an exhaustive 10 years in simulation, representing an ideal but often unattainable benchmark.
Okay, strong comparisons.
Yeah.
And the key results from Table 5.1 and Figures 5.2 and 5.3 show Pearl's remarkable effectiveness. Can you highlight those for us?
Pearl delivered truly remarkable results. In the mixed-use environment, it achieved minimum cumulative emissions, a substantial 31.46% lower than the conventional RPC.
31% lower than rule-based. Wow.
Yeah. In the office block, while RBC had the absolute lowest, Pearl still significantly outperformed all other deep RL baselines. Crucially, and this is where it differentiates itself from many aggressive optimization methods, Pearl produced minimal daily mean temperature infractions, rigorously ensuring occupant thermal comfort.
So it didn't freeze or boil the occupants to save energy.
Exactly. Many baselines like PPO and MPC-DNN often achieved emission reductions by severely sacrificing comfort, with infraction rates as high as 51.23% and 49.13% respectively. This highlights Pearl's ability to balance conflicting objectives.
That balance is key. And the load shifting capabilities you mentioned earlier, that's a huge benefit for reducing actual carbon emissions, isn't it?
Absolutely. Figure 5.3 clearly illustrates Pearl's impressive ability to load shift. It intelligently minimizes power draw during the early morning and late evening, precisely when grid carbon intensity is typically highest.
Using power when it's cleaner.
Right. By strategically shifting consumption to periods of cleaner energy, it effectively reduces overall CO2 emissions. While Pearl did exhibit slightly higher latency than purely model-free methods, it remained well within practical limits for real-world deployment in building management systems.
What about the effectiveness of that maximum variance exploration strategy during commissioning? Does that really make a difference compared to simpler exploration?
Figure 5.4 provides a resounding answer. It shows that Pearl's MV exploration strategy led to a dynamics model accuracy that consistently and significantly improved with commissioning duration. It starkly outperformed the random walk exploration, a more naive, less informative exploration strategy used by some previous zero-shot building control methods. This robustly validates the author's active information-seeking approach.
So the smart exploration really paid off, and then there's a surprising agent decomposition result from Table 5.2. It challenged a common assumption, didn't it?
It absolutely did, and it's a valuable nuance for the field. The dissertation examined whether Pearl's overall performance was more sensitive to the choice of probabilistic versus deterministic networks for its dynamics model, or to the specific planning algorithm used, MPPI versus random shooting.
Planner versus probabilistic model, which mattered more.
The surprising finding was that Pearl's performance was more sensitive to the choice of the planning algorithm.
Really, the planner over the probabilistic model.
Yes. This challenges a common assumption in model-based RL, which often emphasizes the importance of explicit uncertainty quantification in the model itself. Here, it suggests that the planner's ability to effectively handle and leverage uncertainty for better decision-making might be even more critical than the model's explicit probabilistic nature, at least for this particular building control domain.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture for you, a PhD student, it's not just about building an uncertain model, but having a planner that can effectively exploit that uncertainty for smarter, more robust decision-making. That's a powerful lesson.
Exactly. It's a valuable insight that guides future research in data-efficient, model-based RL, highlighting the interplay between model and planner.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, navigating some truly complex and cutting-edge research. Let's recap the core contributions of this dissertation and then look ahead to what it suggests for the future of RL. The dissertation, as we've seen, successfully advanced the thesis that RL agents can solve unseen tasks, zero-shot, while meeting those crucial real-world constraints.
Yes, it delivered tangible, ingenious solutions for each. For data quality, it introduced conservative, zero-shot RL methods that effectively address the pervasive problem of value overestimation on low-quality datasets, preventing agents from falling into optimistic delusions.
Tackled the bad data.
For observability, it developed memory-based zero-shot RL methods that brilliantly mitigated state and task misidentification under partial observations, allowing agents to form robust internal representations.
Handled the fuzzy view.
And for data availability, it presented Pearl, which spectacularly demonstrated zero-shot control of complex real-world systems like buildings with a truly minimal amount of prior data or pre-training.
Learned from almost nothing. Impressive. But no research is without its limitations, and the author is very clear about the remaining challenges.
Certainly. The author acknowledges that even these conservative methods, while vastly improving robustness, still show lower absolute performance than vanilla methods trained on ideal, perfectly high-quality data sets, the holy grail we rarely see in the wild.
Still a gap to the ideal scenario.
Yes, memory-based methods, while powerful, still often assume that some exploratory data is collected on their behalf, even if it's imperfect. And crucially, Perl's impressive success in a mission-efficient building control might not directly translate to every more complicated system, particularly those requiring vastly more data to accurately model their intricate, nonlinear physics. These are all vital avenues for future research to push these boundaries even further.
Important caveats. And finally, the dissertation concludes with a truly thought-provoking philosophical divide on the future trajectory of simulation and intelligence. The big world versus the Platonic representation hypothesis, as visually alluded to in Figure 6.1. This feels like the ultimate question shaping our field.
It's a profound dichotomy. The big world hypothesis argues that the real world will always remain too vast, too complex, too irreducible to ever be perfectly modeled or simulated.
The world is just too big to simulate perfectly.
Essentially, yes. As our computational power grows, so too does the complexity of the world we're able to sense with higher fidelity sensors, and the complexity of the agents we need to simulate. This hypothesis implies a continued and perhaps even growing relevance for ideas like continual learning, partial models, and approaches that excel in short horizon planning with approximate models, much like Pearl, Chapter 5. It suggests the world remains inherently dynamic and ever unfolding.
So, constant adaptation, robust approximation, and learning on the fly are key. What about the Platonic representation hypothesis?
That view posits that as deep networks grow in scale and computational resources, they are progressively converging toward a shared, underlying, perhaps even Platonic, statistical model of reality.
A universal model hiding underneath.
Kind of. As these models get bigger and are trained to solve an increasing diversity of tasks, their internal representations become more and more alike, suggesting the existence of a universal, ideal representation of the world. This hypothesis would lend strong theoretical and empirical support to scaling methods like USFs and FB, chapters 3 and 4, as they fundamentally aim to model comprehensive successor measures across the entire state space. It suggests that eventually a truly universal, unifying model of the world might indeed emerge, one that can elegantly generalize to almost anything.
That's a truly fascinating dichotomy, isn't it? Which future will we inhabit? It feels like the answer will fundamentally dictate the direction of much of our research for decades to come.
Precisely. The dissertation leaves us, quite brilliantly, with that open and deeply philosophical question, which serves as a perfect point for reflection and inspiration.
And what an incredible journey it's been. We've navigated the complex, often frustrating landscape of zero-shot reinforcement learning, exploring how a new generation of agents can begin to overcome the fundamental real-world constraints of data quality, observability, and data availability. We've seen elegant, often surprising solutions emerge from conservative value functions that prevent optimistic delusions, to memory-augmented models that navigate imperfect information, and actively exploring systems like Pearl that push the boundaries of what RL can achieve right out of the box with minimal data.
For you, a PhD student in deep reinforcement learning, this deep dive offers not just cutting-edge techniques, but a robust, actionable framework for thinking about the most critical challenges in making RL truly practical and deployable. It highlights the ingenuity required to move beyond the idealized simulator and into the real, imperfect, and wonderfully complex world we inhabit.
As we conclude this deep dive, we leave you with the author's ultimate provocative question. Which future will we inhabit? The big world, where approximations and continual adaptation are paramount, or the Platonic representation, where a universal underlying model of reality might ultimately emerge? Your own research, your own innovations will undoubtedly play a pivotal part in shaping that answer. How will your work contribute to this grand narrative? We can't wait to find out.